1 year after a presidential election where Donald Trump swept swing states and secured majorities in both houses of the U.S. Congress, a first test and a radically different result.
Donald Trump, since I know you're watching, I have 4 words for you. Turn the volume up.
34-year-old Democratic Socialist blowing past establishment candidates for mayor of New York, unveiling his transition team this Wednesday. We'll ask about Zohran Mamdani's win and the highest turnout in the city's municipal elections in more than half a century. We'll also ask about wins for more moderate Democrats elsewhere and whether Republicans should worry ahead of next year's congressional midterms. Donald Trump attributes the setback in part to the fact that he wasn't on the ballot. The U.S. president may have a point. Since returning to office, he has monopolized the airwaves. How do the TikTok skills of a Mamdani measure up to the politics of outrage coming from the far right? And will Trump double down on retribution? Will he send federal troops to more cities run by Democrats, including his native New York? More broadly, will democracy in America now grow more polarized, or will the center eventually hold? Today in the France 24 debate, how radical a change is in the air. With us is Bernard Harcourt, professor of law and political theory at Columbia University in New York City, here in Paris, because you're also with the French School of Higher Learning and Social Studies, EHESS. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Francois.
You are the author, by the way. Your books include The Counter-Revolution, How Our Government Went to War Against Its Own Citizens. Jen Schrady, associate professor at the Center for Research on Social Inequalities at the French Political Science Institute, Sciences Po. Your books include The Revolution That Wasn't, How Digital Activism Favors Conservatives. Good to see you.
Happy to be here.
From Washington, Jamie Kirchick, global reporter for Axel Springer. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
She's a New York-raised, Paris-based tech startup executive, Larissa Morimoto. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.
Excited to be here.
On the go, by the way, you can listen to the show wherever podcasts are streamed. Yeah, Democrats running the board ahead of the election day 1 year from now, which will be the midterms. That's the big prize. Still, they have plenty to celebrate about, as Delana D'Souza explains.
A humbling night for Donald Trump. A year after securing the presidency for a second time, a string of defeats for the Republican Party. In Trump's hometown of New York, a self-described Democratic Socialist won the mayor's race. Zohran Mamdani, the son of immigrants, will be the first Muslim to lead the city, and he's gearing up for a fight with Trump.
If anyone can show a nation betrayed by Donald Trump how to defeat him, it is the city that gave rise to him. And if there is any way to terrify a despot, it is by dismantling the very conditions that allowed him to accumulate power.
Democrats also secured gubernatorial races in Virginia and New Jersey. Outcomes the races victors say send a message to Trump.
We're not going to give in to our darker impulses. Here in New Jersey, we know that this nation has not ever been, nor will it ever be, ruled by kings.
We sent a message to the whole world that in 2025, Virginia chose pragmatism over partisanship. We chose our Commonwealth over chaos.
Across the country in California, the state's residents approved a redistricting push by Democrats. The move boosts the party's chances of winning control of the House next year.
After poking the bear, this bear roared with an unprecedented turnout in a special election with an extraordinary result. No crowns, no thrones, no kings. That's what this victory represents. It's a victory for the people of the state of California and the United States of America.
A year after sweeping to victory, Donald Trump took stock of the current political realities in the United States, saying Republicans lost because he wasn't on the ballot and because of the government shutdown underway, which the party has blamed on Democrats.
Let me begin with you, Larissa Morimoto. When was the first time you heard the name Zohran Mamdani, and what was your reaction after last night's result?
So the first time I actually heard about him was over the summer. So I think I was a bit late to the party, but it was through an Instagram reel. And it was a creator that I follow. His name is Kieran, and he hosts this show called Subway Takes. I don't know if any of you have seen it. It's called Subway Takes, and he just goes around asking people questions on the subway. And one of the guests that he had on was Zohran. And so the first question he asked him was, "Are you going to be mayor of New York City?" And Zohran said, "Of course." And for me, I was like, okay, but why is a mayoral candidate on TikTok? And that just drew so much confusion. It drew intrigue as well, because I started reading through the comments, and then that made me find him really appealing as a person and not just a candidate.
Not just a candidate. That story, not a surprise to you, Jen Schrady.
So what is up with social media and Mamdani, right? So it's not a surprise that someone who is very deft and skilled at using social media as he is, right? So he was on social media before he even won the primary. But I think what really made a difference was how authentic he really was online, and getting that message across by embracing that which Republicans and the far right have really been attacking those on the left, right? He proudly owned his background and identity, being born in Uganda, being South Asian, being Muslim, rather than running away from it, right? And in many ways, his ability to use social media, not only, yes, the short form
So you
TikTok.
can use social media, but only if you actually truly believe what you're saying.
I don't think it's that at all. In fact, conservatives have been very effective, and yes, often believe what they're saying. But both on the left and the right, we've had a lot of manufactured digital engagement. It's happened for a long time, even before digital media. But again, what was different is that rather than running away from attacks, he in a very simple way, really laid out his platform. And I think what's interesting to me as I really watched his campaign wasn't as much the format, but it was really the content, right? That he really did address a very key focus message around affordability. And that's something that the far right has been very successful at, having a very clear, focused message around freedom. And I talk about that in my book, right? How conservatives can really focus on that and have for well over a decade, if not longer. And it's trickier with those on the left who have a lot of different messages. This idea of kind of fairness has been really difficult. And what Mamdani really did is he was really able to hyper-focus on a message that really mattered to a lot of people.
Yeah, he repeated that message again, Bernard Harcourt, in his day after speech, repeatedly stating, we're in the most expensive city in the world. By the way, we're in the most expensive city in the world. This is the most expensive city in the world.
Right. No, clearly, I agree with Jen that, the social media is important. I think that Gen Z is important. But I think that what's most important is that he had a clear, positive message, right? And it's actually a model, I think, for Democrats in the coming election. We knew what he stood for, and it was a positive message, right? To make New York City affordable, right? And to make New York City affordable with these policies that everybody knew in New York. You know, it's free buses, it's free childcare, it's rent stabilization, caps on rents. It's, city-run grocery store. So what he did, what he was able to do really was to stay on task in a positive way. It wasn't negative campaigning. It's really no negativity in the way in which, there's so much negativity coming from, say, President Donald Trump. And it was to stay and to have a message. And I think that Now, it's going to be a different message for New York City, possibly, than for the rest of the country, because it's got particular unique circumstances. Although affordability, I think, is something that is across the country. And in fact, on affordability, what's one of the most fascinating things is you just saw Trump take that word, right, in one of his posts today, where he said, affordability is key. And to me, that's as if he's pulling that from the Mamdani campaign right there. So it's that positive message, and a real message, right? Something that we know. It's not just no kings, right? That's a negative message. And you heard, for instance, Governor Newsom was using the no kings mantra. It's okay, that's fine, but people want to know what do you stand for in terms of a positive agenda? And he gave it.
James Kirchick, of course, New York City is not the United States. Still, we heard in that clip of the governor-elect of Virginia, she also talks about pragmatism over partisanship. What is the winning formula these days, whether you're on the left or the right?
We only need to look at the results of this election. Zohran Mamdani did worse than any victorious mayoral candidate in decades. He won 50% of the vote. If you look back at Eric Adams, you look back at Bill de Blasio, Michael Bloomberg, they all get 60% or above. And the reason for that is because a lot of people in the city of New York do not like Zohran Mamdani. So many that Andrew Cuomo ran as an independent and got 40%. And you add on the almost 10% that the Republican got, and you have half the city against this guy. So you compare that really actually bad results for Zohran Mamdani to the amazing results that the moderate Democrats got in New Jersey and Virginia. Abigail Spanberger won by 15% in Virginia, which is a purple state. She did really well. And Nikki Sherrill did about as well, 12 or 13%, I believe, in New Jersey. So if I were a Democrat nationally looking at this, I would absolutely say we got to go with the moderate course. We got to go with the Sherrill and the Spanberger course, not with that of a Democratic Socialist like Zohran Mamdani.
About 3/4, by the way, of New York City voters under 30 cast ballots for Mamdani. We'll know soon exactly what percentage, maybe there'll be more exit polls on how many of those Gen Zers actually did turn up to the polls. NBC News political reporter Alan Smith noting the surge in vote for Democrats among young men when compared with last year's presidential election in all three of the races that James was mentioning there. And there you see, there's a jump in all of them. The pollster and former Biden advisor, John Della Volpe, who then offered up this note of caution, if you will, when I learned tonight is that Gen Z men remain the most progressive generation in America, but young men are the most politically fluid. Young women are driving the Dem advantage, but young men are deciding whether that advantage lasts. Larissa Morimoto, is it brittle, this sudden surge in interest by young people?
I don't think so. I think it's been
And is there a war of the sexes to a degree?
I don't think so. I think it's been a long time coming, and I think Zohran's victory represents much more than just a regular victory. It represents this move towards anti-establishment that Gen Z is empowering and kind of taking into their own hands. I'm not an expert by any means, but I think that what we're done with is the cookie-cutter Democrat who comes and says they're going to do something, and then 2 years later they have nothing shipped, nothing done. And so for me, having somebody who is able to kind of absorb and bleed what a real New Yorker embodies come into power, I think is such a great signal towards this step towards anti-establishment and reclaiming the power back into the hands of the people who built the city, who are hustling in the city, who commute every day, who have to kind of suffer these consequences of the bad economic policies that we've seen affect New York City recently.
So you hear Larissa hailing the anti-establishment vibe. You heard James saying that's not going to play in places like Virginia and New Jersey come a general election. Jen Schrady, what's the magic formula for the Democratic Party?
It is grassroots organizing. It is on the street. Despite how important social media was to the New York campaign, clearly not only trying to convince voters who to vote for, but really understanding what those issues are is really key. And, you know, the Mamdani campaign has boasted that they had 3 million door knocks, right? And that really, I'm sure, is pretty close to how many folks were out in the street. So I think it's overly simplistic to say that it's because of social media per se or anti-establishment, although I think that is part of it. But clearly, the Democratic Party needs something different than the same. And yes, maybe Mamdani only quote unquote got 50% of the vote. But for someone who came out of nowhere and before the primary, I think he had something like 3% of the population. Most people didn't even know who he was. Upending the New York Democratic establishment is unprecedented in decades. So I think we have to take that lower percentage than previous elections in New York City with a grain of salt. And I think it's clear that having policies that, like the question of affordability, that really address what everyday Americans are really facing, including those who voted for Trump, right? And I think we can't forget that. The same old story that Democrats have been telling
because a lot of those who voted
working.
for Donald Trump a year ago did it because Trump had a clearer message when it came to inflation and how to reduce it.
That's, I think, part of the point, right? Is that Mamdani really was addressing these economic issues squarely on the head, right? And as Bernard noted, in a very positive way. And that's something that, if we look back at Bernie Sanders' success over the last decade, he also kind of came out of the Vermont woodwork, so to speak, and was a very strong contender, largely because he was really addressing those bread and butter issues.
You heard there James Kirchick the talk by Jen of needing, despite the digital world playing such a role, people to go knock on doors. To get those people to knock on doors, you need enthusiasm. Where is the enthusiasm today in the United States?
Well, certainly on the left, it appears to be, and in urban areas, I would say, it appears to be with, radical left-wing candidates like Zohran Mamdani, who I should say is not really a Democrat, okay? He's a Democrat in name only. He's technically a Democrat. What he really is a member of the Democratic Socialists of America, which is an extreme left-wing, almost crypto-communist political party that did not get a lot of attention during this election. Okay, this is a party that believes that there should be no borders in the United States. It believes in extending the vote to non-citizens. It believes in abolishing prisons. It believes in abolishing the police. It believes in normalizing relations with Cuba, Venezuela, North Korea, and Iran. It's an extremely radical organization. And the Democrats are in deep trouble because if they don't put a stop to this, if they don't expel the members of the DSA from their caucus, if they don't prevent them from running in their primaries, they are going to be, the DSA will become the face of the Democratic Party. And that is a dream to the Republican Party, okay? It is a dream of Donald Trump and every Republican in the country. They would love to have Zohran Mamdani and AOC be the face of the Democratic Party, because then there are accusations
on the campaign trail, James, Zohran Mamdani stating that he's not for defunding the police. In fact, he said he would keep the same police commissioner who's currently serving on in the job.
Right. So I don't believe anything he said on the campaign trail. He has been very open about his political beliefs up until he started receiving scrutiny in the general election. He is a committed member of the DSA. He has said multiple times he believes that the state of Israel does not have a right to exist. He has said that the police should be defunded. It was only when he realized that this might actually hurt his election chances that he retracted that statement. He actually did very little during the campaign to separate himself from the DSA. He just said once, all he said was, I am not running on the DSA platform. That's it, which, by the way he phrased that means that he could implement the DSA agenda as mayor, which I think he will try to do. All of the people he's bringing into his administration, the senior leading ones, are hardcore left-wing ideologues. They pulled a really fast one on the New York media and on the citizens of New York. And I pray for them because they're going to be living with the results of this disastrous decision that they made to elect this man mayor.
All right, many on Wall Street had actively campaigned against Mamdani, although some, like billionaire hedge fund manager Bill Ackman, softening on election night. Ackman putting out a tweet to Zohran Mamdani, "Congrats on the win. Now you have a big responsibility. If I can help New York City, just let me know what I can do." Bernard Harcourt, how far to the left is Zohran Mamdani? We're sitting in Paris, so on a world standard and on an American standard.
I think that the description that James just gave is completely off the charts, frankly. It's kind of extremely ideological and simply wrong. Mamdani is associated with the Democratic Socialist Party. That's for sure. But his positions are, by kind of ordinary left politics, solidly left, but not even socialist, really. By comparison to a country like France, he would be considered probably center-left.
Freezing the rent?
Freezing rent, yeah, freezing rent.
Free buses. I know they tried it. They tried free transport in Germany.
Buses in large metropolitan areas should be free. Of course, they should be free. It's a drop in the bucket of the budget. That's not socialism. Trying to create free childcare. De Blasio created pre-K, universal pre-K in New York. We're just pushing back a couple of years and trying to create some better daycare.
Can he build coalitions? Who's surrounding him? Will he scare away Wall Street?
No, people are going to work with him, of course. People are going to work with him and understand. New York City is different than New York City, San Francisco, Chicago are different ecological political systems than parts of the rest of the United States, right? He's in New York City, which is a pretty left-leaning city, solidly democratic, but also left-leaning. We had Bill de Blasio. His politics are not that far from Bill de Blasio, right? And people are going to line up. James doesn't believe anything he said. He's already said today that he's going to maintain Tisch as the police commissioner, right? So he's by no means.
All right, even if he does that, Larissa Morimoto, he's not going to deliver on all the promises he's made. Do you fear a disillusion, a backlash?
No, I don't fear disillusionment. I think, the fact that he was able to win this election and, like Jen said, mobilize through grassroots movement this entire generation of people to go out and vote for him. It's one of the first times that I'm seeing the I voted sticker be such a popularity statement. It's a status symbol that you actually were able to go out and get your vote in the ballots. And so that's such a privilege.
But then if it goes badly, what happens the time after that?
Let's hope that there's not a time after that. But I think with all politicians, it's also a bit of a game. You have to wait to see until they're actually in power to see what they're going to deliver on. But I do have high hopes that Zohran is going to deliver on his promises. I think, the bus, for example, it's a lot of money, but like Bernard was saying, it's a drop in the bucket. So I think if we just have like a stronger mobility system and a stronger way to get New Yorkers from where they are without having to rely on the subway, then I think that's already a win for itself.
As for the President of the United States, his analysis this Wednesday, well, straight to the point.
If you read the pollsters, the shutdown was a big factor, negative for the Republicans, and that was a big factor. And they say that I wasn't on the ballot was the biggest factor. But I don't know about that, but I was honored that they said that.
That I wasn't on the ballot. He has a point, Jen Schrady. This is a U.S. president that captures not only his country, but the whole world's attention with everyday some new controversy and outrage du jour. He occupies the media space. We're talking about Zohran Mamdani today, but there's 365 days in a year.
Of course, Trump generates this outrage. And in fact, what we're seeing on algorithms today is how much the right and conservatives have kind of capitalized on Mamdani's victory and trying to use him as a foil. But it's not going to continue to be effective as, again, this grassroots organizing continues to happen around the country. And I think that's something to really point out. We don't really see on the mainstream media as much what's going on locally around the United States right now, not just in New York City, not just in San Francisco. There are groups mobilizing to fight against ICE. There are groups mobilizing around mutual aid to protest against the militarization of cities that are happening, and people are connected. And because, though, of the attacks on people that do speak out, people losing jobs, professors losing jobs in the United States for basic free speech, I think we're not picking up on all the everyday organizing that people on the left and everyday people in the United States are doing. And I think that is growing and will continue to grow to resist the fascism that has developed in the U.S.
All right, in the city that made both Mamdani and Trump a sense that the fight is only beginning. And as the newspaper of record, the New York Times, rolled off the presses this Wednesday, tabloid rival, the New York Post, with a very different tack on this election. Perhaps we can show that banner in the New York Post, which described the advent of a communist, the red apple. Did you on your marks, get set, Zo, socialist Mamdani wins race for mayor, and there you see him with the hammer and sickle. Last week, a Republican congressman from Tennessee announced plans to investigate the now mayor-elect of New York City to see if there's a way of perhaps denaturalizing and deporting Zohran Mamdani. Is that just one congressman speaking, James Kirchick, or do you think that the Trump administration will try that?
I see no indication that the Trump administration would try that. I mean, you have to understand about American congressmen is that they are extremely press hungry. There's 435 of them. They all think they should be president. And so on both parties, they're constantly coming up with ruses and schemes and, stunts to attract attention. And that's what this particular congressman is doing. It's not going to go anywhere.
How will Donald Trump in the end react? Will he be pragmatic? Zohran Mamdani's hinting already that he will be pragmatic in his dealings with the federal government. Or will it be retribution all the way?
No, I mean, you've seen this already over the past couple of months, which is when Donald Trump has sent in ICE to carry out legal actions, whether you like them or not, and I tend not to like them, but they are legal, of seizing illegal aliens, people in this country illegally. And you have seen violent resistance to this by citizens. You've seen, mayors refusing to cooperate with federal agencies, carrying out their legal duties. And we saw just a couple of months ago, Zohran Mamdani screaming and shouting in Tom Homan's face, Tom Homan being the head of this effort within the government, which is his right to do, by the way, as an American citizen. You're allowed to protest. But I do foresee a crisis scenario in which federal agents are sent in to apprehend illegal immigrants, as they have been, by the way, over the past couple of weeks. And I see something like this happening, and I see protests, and I see the NYPD not being sent in to calm the situation, but being told to stay back. And I see violence erupting in that situation. And I don't know who to blame for that. I think that fault could be put on both sides. But I don't think that Mamdani is going to cooperate with Trump in that particular effort.
Well, you have to realize that the only reason that Trump hasn't sent in the National Guard to New York City is because of Eric Adams, who was
the outgoing mayor,
who he had in his pocket. And so that's the only reason. Well, he sent them to Chicago. He sent them to Washington, D.C., Portland. You know, he would have sent them to New York first if it hadn't been for the fact that Eric Adams was, under federal investigation and got the pardon in exchange for a deal, basically, right? So that's why Trump laid off of New York. There's no doubt that Trump is probably going to target New York now, at least after January 1st, I would think. And it'll probably take the same form that it's taken in Chicago. It's not going to be any different. We're going to see a same replay. We're going to see the same, ICE, and then the attempts to protect ICE and send in National Guards and possibly some troops.
And do you agree with James Kirchick? We could see Mamdani holding back the New York police and therefore relishing some kind of an escalation?
No, the Commissioner Tisch is staying in Police Plaza. That's clear. He said it again today. And Commissioner Tisch is going to be probably trying to negotiate the space the best she can, as will Mamdani. I mean, Mamdani understands the stakes. He's being pragmatic. He understands the stakes, and so he'll be trying to avoid the kind of escalation that would result in a real violent encounter in the streets of New York. There will be litigation. One of the things that Mamdani has made clear is that he's going to participate in the litigation against Trump. And so far, all of the litigation has prevented the National Guard deployments. We've seen it in Chicago, in Portland, et cetera. Now, Trump might eventually invoke the Insurrection Act, which is the most powerful tool that he has, which he hasn't yet invoked. And if he does that, it's the way the Insurrection Act is written, it really does give him a lot of power, and it's going to be harder for the courts to kind of enjoin his actions if he does invoke the Insurrection Act. However, it's to a certain extent, it's telling that he hasn't done it already, and that also he didn't do it during the first mandate. Right, the last time the Insurrection Act was invoked was under Bush, George W. Bush. Go ahead.
Let me bring in James Kirchick very briefly on this, because I know you want to reply. James, will this ultimately be settled in the courts or in the streets?
Well, I think Mamdani, if you look at his political party that he has pledged allegiance to, that he calls his political home, you look at their manifesto, you look at their activists, you look at his own rhetoric over the years, these people want to heighten the contradictions of capitalism to bring about a revolution. And having violence in the streets between federal officers and the people is one way of going about doing that. So I have no confidence that Mayor Mamdani will keep Commissioner Tisch in her job if she resists what he tells her to do. If he tells her, tell the police to stand down, don't protect the ICE officers, don't cooperate with them and help them carry out their jobs, then he'll fire her.
In Chicago this Wednesday, protesters gathering outside of the federal courthouse, where a man who's attracted attention, the Border Patrol commander, Gregory Bavino, was due to attend another hearing over the use of force in pursuing suspected undocumented workers. Jen Schrady, there was a lot of new coverage in the United States last week. There was the tear gassing of kids going to trick or treat for Halloween, getting a candy, at apartments in a more upscale neighborhood. So far, this deployment of federal troops, how is it playing in the court of public opinion?
So cities have really resisted, by and large, when troops come in. Now, it hasn't yet become a point of a civil war, but I really think we are at a brink right now.
A brink?
We are at close to a brink, because especially I think with what happened with Mamdani, and Trump has threatened to not only cut funding from New York City, whether he can or can't is up in the air, whether he does send in troops to New York and elsewhere. I think what has happened so far is it's been this cat and mouse game where with resistance, we saw it in Portland and we've seen it in other cities, that Chicago, that, then the troops are pulled. But at some point, I think that is the question. That is why we are at a brink. It hasn't become extremely bloody, but we are at the point of no return if, especially if troops come into New York City and other places where, look, we have military occupations within New York cities, within cities of the United States. I think we've started to normalize what Trump is doing way too much, rather than really put out what is happening with this fascist takeover.
Well, right now, there has been a few instances of violence, but mostly it's been shouting and finger pointing, people wearing dress-up costumes at times, inflatable dinosaurs and unicorns and stuff. To have a sort of a civil war kind of situation, you need to have both sides who are fixing for a fight.
Again, I think there are people organizing at different levels. I'm not saying there is, a resistance army per se at this point. But if we look at the far right in particular, if the military occupation and the far right that is very militarized and is armed, I think that we just have to be mindful that, again, we are at a brink. We are not sure where we're going to be. I think last night's election gave somewhat of a reprieve. And if the organizing continues to happen, perhaps if elections continue, which is also an open question.
Perhaps if elections continue.
Right? I mean, I think that it's not outside, and Trump has even talked about trying to run again. And I think it's not going to be that elections necessarily will stop completely. But over the last decade, the far right conservatives have taken over local boards of elections. They've set up so many barriers for people to vote. And so when we talk about if there are elections, some of that is, are there going to be free and fair elections, right? We really need the UN to come in and observe American elections at this point.
Is that, Larissa Morimoto, is that possible in the United States of America, that next year's midterm elections could be in doubt?
I hope not. And I think if that is the case, then we're in serious trouble. I would say, though, that I don't think that we're at the brink of a civil war necessarily, but I do think that with movements like, Black Lives Matter and with the Capitol stormings, we've seen how mobilizing people and bringing them together actually does lead to an outcome. And so regardless of what that outcome is, I think that once people are able to come together and mobilize towards a certain movement, then change does happen. I would hate for it to end in, us losing democracy, let's say. But I do think that it's possible for people to push for change.
This hour began, Bernard, with you talking about messages of hope.
Yes.
And now we're talking about confrontation and civil war. What's going on?
Well, I think that there are a lot of issues on the table right now. Some of them have to do with some aggressive messaging from the far right or from the right today, including from people like Steve Bannon, who has called himself a Leninist, and so there are worries in terms of that. But I really do want to come back though to James's description of the DSA, because I think that in part that's misleading here. The DSA is not a revolutionary party. It's not in favor of an armed revolution the way that James was suggesting. It's not in favor of increasing the contradictions of capitalism so that it leads to a Leninist revolution. It just is not. It's Bernie Sanders' party, right? We're talking Bernie Sanders here. We're not talking Leninists or revolutionaries. We're talking Bernie Sanders. Those are the platforms that we're talking about. It's a ordinary political party. I'm not here to say it would be a problem if they were a Leninist revolutionary party. I'm fine with that too. I mean, whatever. I'm not here to censor anyone. But the DSA is not a revolutionary party.
James Kirchick, right now, it seems from the outside that on the one side, there are these far-right militias, and on the other, there are the inflatable dinosaur costumes.
Seriously?
That's what. That's the images we're getting.
The DSA. Hold on. Yeah. So the DSA celebrated October 7th in multiple cities across the country. Their chapters released statements celebrating the mass rape, torture, and murder of Jews. Okay. They sponsored a rally in Times Square on October 8th, mocking the victims of that attack. Okay. It took Mamdani 2 years to condemn Hamas, and he hesitated a little bit on saying that they should lay down their arms. Okay, there's a reason why over 1,000 rabbis, and I'm surprised we haven't talked about the anti-Semitism of this party and of Mamdani himself. There's a reason over 1,000 rabbis across the country said that he would present a danger to American Jews. There's a reason why the rabbi of the oldest Reform synagogue in America, which is a liberal congregation, joined that call and said that Mamdani's election will threaten Jewish life in New York City. There's a reason why 60% of Jews in New York didn't vote for the Democratic nominee. That's like never happened before, okay? So yeah, this guy is dangerous, and the DSA is a dangerous anti-Semitic party. And whether or not they want to have an armed revolution, which I never said, I said that they want chaos. They want chaos because that's in their theory, their cockamamie Marxist theory is how the revolution will come. Whether or not, what faction or tract of Marxism that they subscribe to, they absolutely represent a danger to the Jews of New York City. That's the majority of Jews in New York City who say that. That's not me sitting here in Washington telling you that. That's what most Jews believe. And I've yet to hear anyone on this panel, and certainly on the left in America, seriously contend with what it means to have elected a man on the Democratic Party ticket who represents a danger to Jewish life in the most Jewish city in the world.
Jen Trady, does Zohran Mamdani represent a danger to Jews?
Again, I think no. And I think why he was so successful is a major Democratic candidate actually named the genocide in Palestine. And I think, again, naming that which a lot of Democrats and others have been too nervous to name is why actually Mamdani was so successful.
All right, well, unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. There's so much more to talk about with this election. I want to thank you, Jen Trady. I want to thank as well Bernard Harcourt, Larissa Morimoto, James Kirchick for being with us from Washington, D.C. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.